It's the 11th day. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to be your host tonight. I'm Dana. Hope you're doing well. We're in Canada. You can call into these live shows at 709-589-4406. 4406. Don't forget to do some clicking around to make sure everybody. There's lots of nuclear stuff going on after. We're going to talk about Conference of Parties 29 first. And get, because this is the first day, right? So nuclear is being pushed, small modular reactors. Is Conference of Parties 29 push for a small modular reactor nuclear power a disgusting betrayal of humanity and millions of species? Yeah, well, actually it is, Dana, yes. Some clicking. We're on YouTube. My apologies. It's unfortunately the best platform. Here we go. Rock and roll. Airlines must pay for their pollution. So last year on Conference of Parties 28, Constipated Parties 28, they really should, like, using the word COP, I think is just pretty pathetic, isn't it? So not just the airlines, the biggest polluters is the military, the high altitude. It takes decades and decades and decades for this big particles to fall out, right? Climate activists. You can be anything but a nuclear activist on this planet and you'll get prominence in the media. But if you're a nuclear activist, so my heart goes out to all the nuclear activists. I'm not a nuclear activist, by the way. I'm a researcher. We do species counts after major nuclear accidents to see if there's any adverse effects. And our job is really easy now. Most of the species are gone after Fukushima, so it's pretty easy work. That's not necessarily a good thing. It's pretty boring because there's nothing out there anymore. So the military, of course, my goodness, the pollution they've created, how do you compare that to a continent? The militaries worldwide combined are equal to at least two of the biggest continents in emissions. Now, carbon, of course, you can't have trees or plants or humans or animals or butterflies or puppies without carbon. So carbon's pretty useful. Nuclear, not so much. Radioactive fallout attacks everything in replicating cells. But airlines, the airplanes, the personal jets and everything else are exempt from carbon taxes and everything else. Last year there was 475 carbon capture lobbyists attending Conference of Parties 28. And Conference of Parties 29 started today. So the world's 15 biggest ships produce more pollution than all the cars in the world. That never gets any prominence, I notice, at the Conference of Parties. And their pollution is nasty because somewhere along the way they were allowed to take waste left over from fuel, from oil, and then burn that, and it's very inefficient, right? So 15 biggest ships, there's 90,000 of them on the ocean currently, which is equal to 4.2 trillion people on the planet when you scale it up to the cars, for instance, right? So 760 million cars, just 15 ships produce more pollution. More pollution, not the same, but more. So multiply that by 90,000 and you're hitting a few ballparks. This year they're expecting solar power to reach 660 gigawatts. It's equal to 700 large nuclear power plants or 5,000 small modular reactors in just 12 months. Geothermal getting no loving again this year. It's just like it doesn't exist. It's like Cinderella. Geothermal truly is like Cinderella. They're aiming for an annual growth rate of 40%, which looks like they're surpassing that again this year. So last year was 440 gigawatts. It's just absurd. It's absurd the amount of energy we're talking about in the 12-month that came online. Would result in 622 gigawatts of newly installed capacity in 2024. Now, the estimates now, though, are 660 gigawatts by the end of the year. And you got to realize commodity prices have risen dramatically because of the artificial inflation caused by Ukraine and Russia, right? That was artificially, it was a real war, don't get me wrong. It's just a horrifying war. It's so horrific what the soldiers are doing to each other with drones, where they chase each other around till they blow the other guy up. Some sick shit, man. Excuse the Canadian coming out of me here. So 660 gigawatts, how come this is not going to get any prominence either at the Conference of Parties? Conference of Parties 29 negotiators, this is the first day, has already agreed on a global carbon market mechanism. Negotiators. So there's no referendum for countries or anything like that. We don't matter. The only people that matters is the people that sits at UN's tables. They make all the decisions. We don't have to make any decisions. We don't matter. That's pretty arrogant. And who the hell are these people anyway? Well, it used to be the Conference of Parties till Nagasaki, Hiroshima, right? Then they like to step up their game a bit and say, join us or you're in real trouble. Agree on global carbon market mechanisms. This picture's got a lot of traction today, I notice. Proponents argue, and we'll put it on the bigger screen, I guess. If I can't read it, what's the odds you can read it? Proponents argue that new market will form the gold standard for emission trading. It's like they're looking for... I can't remember what was it last year? I got it coming up here. They argue the new market will form the gold standards for emission trading, the gold standards. This is a $70 trillion industry we're talking about now. And buyers, mostly in wealthier countries, would be able to meet their climate goals by buying credits from projects that cut pollution. Bear with me here. I gotta get myself set up. La 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 la. Almost here. Hang with me. Here we go. I just want to make a point where we're talking about this. The rules dubbed Article 6.4 after the initial proposal under the landmark 2015 Paris Agreement stipulated how countries should trade carbon credits through UN-operated marketplace. UN is unelected and taking over the whole planet now. Okay, so in Japan, I just want to talk about carbon and radiation for a second. So you had 4 reactors that were old reactors, were huge reactors. Reactor 3 was pure plutonium. It was reclaimed uranium plutonium. It was a plutonium mixed oxide reactor. It's what they call a breeder reactor. At the top of it was 8 fuel pools, or 8 reactor cores and 2 fuel pools. And they have so much there because they don't have a repository anywhere on the planet. These were 190-foot, 65-meter, 19-story buildings, both of them. There's 4 of these buildings. So 36 reactor cores were lost. They successfully covered it up. Here's one instance of them covering it up, where this is just a fraction of the media is pretending they're 100 feet above the stump of Reactor 4 at Fukushima Daiichi's. pretending that they're getting the fuel at the pool. And so they're way above the fuel pool, which is at the top of the buildings. So it's quite remarkable that they've done something like that. But the reason they've done it, they don't want to be blamed for the radiation that is actually killing the species. And then the plume models, and you can call radioactive fallout global warming, and I'll explain that to you. Fukushima radioactive fallout, I put that there to remind myself to go into detail. So this is very simple. So imagine a snowstorm that starts in Japan on March 11, 2011. And that's the snowstorm, and at day 16, the whole planet is covered in a snowstorm. Snow never melts, the snow never goes away. Instead of being cold, it pulses energy. Every snowflake pulses energy almost at the speed of light. So gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas. There's 5 types of snowflakes. There's gamma, alpha, neutrons, and betas. And when they hit each other, they crash into each other almost at the speed of light. They change direction. That's known as a break-in effect. We call it an X-ray. They don't mingle together. So instead of a snowstorm, you got a radioactive plume model based on France's model of 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137. This is real because it pulses energy 600 feet. So gas, oil, and coal emissions, carbon, don't pulse energy. And it doesn't pulse anything. It's just carbon, right? It gets assimilated back into plants and trees and insects and biota and animals and microscopic animals and everything else. Phytoplankton, the bases of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestration chain. You can't have any... If we don't have carbon, we look exactly like the moon. There won't be anything on the planet. Right now, all the carbon is contaminated with anthropogenic man-made radiation from 80 years of emission. But what happened was... you have this pulse event at Japan with 36 reactors going, atomizing and aerosoling. And they're also atomizing and aerosoling because the reactor 1 and 2, which some of it went China syndrome, most of it went China syndrome in reactor 2. The reactor core, the fuel pool ignited and detonated. And you got videos and pictures of that. But we believe the reactor core, reactor 1 also went China syndrome. But we know reactor 3 and 4, they cooked off their reactors and fuel pools right away. And so the plume model, here you got an invisible snowstorm that covers the planet in radiation. You can't see it or smell it or hear it or feel it or taste it or touch it or pick it up or throw rocks at it or perceive it. But after 16 days, according to the French government, which I concur with, and so does all the other major institutes, we got many different models articulating that, right? The Norwegian Institute for Air Research model shows the plume covering the whole planet in 19.5 days, 468 hours. I believe that one was on cesium-137, iodine-131. But the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rod is the curium isotopes, not... And cesium, don't get me wrong, cesium's terrible stuff. And so is iodine, right? Okay. So, global warming is clearly caused by 80 years of emissions from 1,000 fuel pools. All the fuel pools are still splitting atoms. Climate groups were hesitant in welcoming the new rule, which they said still had significant issues. Yet they just rushed through the carbon credit, eh? The carbon market mechanism, they're calling it now. It's carbon credits. Call it what it is. Carbon Market Watch. There's a massive industry out there, by the way. Said that one key issue was over how projects would deal with so-called reversal risk, which stored carbon leaks back into the atmosphere. So if you have a forest fire, protected forest, it catches fire, that carbon sink goes back into the environment, but wherever it ends up to, it grows more trees, right? More bushes, more plants, more flowers, more bees, more pollinators, more insects for the birds, for the ecosystem. But radiation doesn't have any of those attributes. It kills everything. So now we're seeing thousands of emaciated whales and thousands And Fukushima created another effect where it killed the phytoplankton, which changed the cycle of the oceans. It also heated up the environment because you have this pulse event destroying the ecosystem. It's no longer functioning. It's not perspiring. Everything has changed. So the reason you're seeing the big forest fires is because you have so much radiation in your forest it kills the biota. And the biota, which normally breaks down the foliage and the litter in the forest, is no longer there. And so now the foliage and the litter that normally would be broken down by the incredible, massive microscopic community is tinder dry. And so it's sitting around when it should have broke down and it should have been moist and damped in the forest, is no longer has those particular attributes. We know that we're out there doing the research, and you can stick your arm right down into the ground. It's so dry. You can stick it right down to an ant's nest, and we do it all the time, right? And what that means, though, is the earth is not soaking up water. So when you have rain, the rain flash floods. You have flash floods. And because you see all the continent, the whole planet is being assaulted by this anthropogenic man-made material, there's nothing on the planet that has an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. And so it destroys the bases of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequester chain, and all the fresh water, the phytoplankton, and all the fresh water in all the oceans. But it also destroys the biota in the forest, and so the forest doesn't soak up the water anymore. And when you do get the lightning strikes, now you have all this tinder dry biota, foliage and litter, and it wafers up. It floats up this great big chunks, and that'll travel a few thousand feet. And when it settles down, you have a bonfire going off, right? And we predicted this shortly after 3/11 that we would see that effect, right? And then because you have so much release into the environment, what we're seeing in the oceans, which of course, because the plumes cover the ocean right away. So in 2 weeks, all the oceans, all the fresh water are covered. So when you look, we went out and done the research expeditions on the Pacific Ocean for 6 years, and we discovered the species were exterminated. The coastline was stripped of the 7,000 visible species. We're not going to go through that tonight, but I should probably. But we're still loading up everything. I haven't got that loaded up on the hard drive that I was using. Turned out that I had to erase everything and reformat it to salvage it, and I haven't plugged it back in yet. Bear with me. Oh. Yeah, here we go. Or maybe not. It'll make me work for it, are we? It's crazy, eh? Okay, don't worry about it. Let's just keep going here because I'm having a hard time. Maybe I'm not. Actually, here we go. I'm not sure if that works on a search. We'll find out in a second. Yeah, that works. So this is the before and after the West Coast. We've done the species counts out there. And we've done 4 to 5 months a year counting the species. The species to your left now are now exterminated. They didn't come back. We went for 6 years. So after the first year, when we realized they were all missing, post Fukushima, We had to go back multiple years to see if they recovered, and they didn't come back. Which means the super life is broken, right? And so the species to your left, you'll never take those pictures again, because that's because of the radioactive fallout from Japan. So if you look at all the supercell hurricanes, the supercell typhoons, the supercell cyclones, etc., the massive flooding worldwide, you'll see the spikes all happen post Fukushima, right? Pre Fukushima it happened, but it was a very rare. It did happen quite a lot though during the nuclear testing and just after the heavy nuclear testing, which is the same as when the cancer epidemic started too, right? Where do we draw the line? Well, we draw the line by being honest, and I don't see honesty coming out so far over the last number of years. We cover this each year. Critics say approval of the climate credit rules on day one of the Conference of Parties 29 was rushed. Rushed? I didn't even know it happened. Most of us had no concept until they came out and announced it. It only started the day, boom. Climate credits are already a law worldwide, and there's nothing you can do about it. There's no referendums. There's no democratic. So they can basically close Conference of Parties 29 down now, and they already accomplished what they wanted. The rest of it is just show and tell. Right? It's all, that's what we see every year. They do these little routines on day one before anybody's even aware. Because most people are not aware. They're not paying attention. They won't see it till it shows up in the news. And so all the media will come out and say, well, there you go. It's official now. Too late to protest. Too late to have a voice. Critics say the approval of climate credits rules on day one of the Conference of Parties was rushed. The critics have warned the rules were rushed through without following proper procedures. Critics. You're a critic. The humans with a conscience said. The agreement is expected to provide the clarity needed to trade emissions within a global carbon market. Of course, it's going to be supervised by the United Nations, which is unelected, not appointed. It's a corporation that Eisenhower described as the military-industrial complex with 195 militaries. And so they're having this conference party, and the whole world is supposed to get on their knees and donate so that they can go down there and have a big hoo-ha. We're all supposed to take this corporation that, this is just, United Nations is just a corporation that over post Hiroshima and Nagasaki has assimilated themselves in almost every facet of everybody's lives worldwide. Let me figure this out here. So-called the humans with a conscience / critics of the carbon markets, there was no debate, there's no referendum, nobody even knew this was going to happen, have pointed to a history of offset projects, over-promising, under-delivering, with wildfires burning through forests that were supposed to be protected and emissions from renewable energy projects being counted on balance books, even though they would probably have been built anyway. In other words, they were just, everything that was existing was counted to try to give them some street creds, right? How nuclear kills fish. And before we get to that, I'm going to play a little clip for everybody. So like, it's hard to appreciate how many fingers United Nations has into humanity, right? Nuclear is a really good way of comprehending because you got UNSCLEAR, ERPA, the IPRC, International Atomic Energy Agencies. These are all UN subsidies. And very powerful, eh? So you got Kyle Vetter, you got TEPCO from Japan, you got Miles O'Brien, the one-armed bandit, you got the former chair of the NRC in the waitress, you got Kathleen Higley, a professor of nuclear in the United States, but also a heavily, one of the worst propaganda machines you ever come across. I just want to show you how the structure works, though, because this really does tell an interesting story. It's just a short video. I'm going to duck out and play it for you. And it's interesting how the journalist that are sitting in the audience knows how to laugh on cue. But she's going to explain basic structures of the United Nations when it comes to nuclear. And you can apply that model now to most of the facets of your lives, because that's who's got their fingers in it.
When I was trying to pull this talk together, not only will I sort of get a little philosophical about the impacts and the like and try to put things in context, but I also wanted to talk a little bit about who are these radiation experts that get trotted out in events like this, or that get to participate in various activities and analysis to make pronouncements about is something safe or not safe. And if you look, you'll see organizations that are often represented. The ICRP, International Commission on Radiological Protection, a premier organization. You'll see UNSCEAR and ERPA. So UNSCEAR is the United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation. ERPA, the International Radiation Protection Association. The IAEA and some of its folks, the International Atomic Energy Agency. Our own US, NCRP. And then there are a number of other organizations. So there's PAHO, there's the Health Physics Society, there's World Health Organization. All of these will bring in, as necessary, experts to speak to you on issues related to radiation protection, radiation safety, and impacts. But if you go a little deeper and you start looking at these organizations, the ICRP, for example, very well known, it's been operating nearly 100 years, not quite. Main commission, 10 people. It's got 5 standing committees. So it's 100-ish folks. I lead one of the 5 committees. If you look at the United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation that looked at the effects from Chernobyl, from Fukushima, from other areas, and that has about 30, roughly, countries that are represented in that group. If you start teasing through these pictures, you're going to see the same people on every one of those organizations. So the same people from ICRP are on UNSCEAR, they're in ERPA. If you look at the NCRP, again, the US organization that advises the country on radiation protection issues, it's 100 people, a lot of gray-haired 100 people. And most of them are part of UNSCEAR, are part of ERPA, are part of ICRP, participate in IAEA. So the result, or the real world, is that there's not that many folks that really do radiation safety, radionuclide transport, dose calculations, all of this in the world. It's a pretty small club. And we wear 20 hats. Today I put on 3 pins, and I could put on a whole bunch more, but Health Physics Society, ICRP, Certified Health Physicist, I've got NCRP on there, I've done IAEA, and so the point is, we're a small group, you should cherish us. So
you should cherish them. So your journalists are not who you think you are. The people that are making the decisions are not who you think they are. They're rubber stamp crew, right? How nuclear kills fish. Talking about a single like Indian Point, because yesterday, as we know, right, and today they're promoting nuclear as the climate savior again. I mean, there's 660 gigawatts of just solar power came online by the end of this year. In just 12 months. How is nuclear supposed to compete with something like that? And if you put geothermal and then solar and wind for backup or for peak power, if you do geothermal right, you won't need anything for a backup. And everything in geothermal, you can just build a new facility 50 years down the road right alongside of it, turn off the old one, then recycle it and build another one somewhere else. These facilities kill more than 17 billion fish annually in New York and another 9 billion fish each year. So there's 413 reactors currently. They're going backwards less. They're negative gigawatts online this year. And just solar alone was 660 gigawatts by the end of the year or more. So this is different ways that a single nuclear power plant kills fish. Remember, a typical salt water would have 1 billion creatures into it. Natural soup of life, right? And it would kill all of them. So a reactor goes through 4,500 tons of water, 1 million gallons a minute, every minute, 1,440 minutes a day. So the facilities kill 17 billion fish each year in New York, another 9 billion in New Jersey. National Marine Fisheries Services found that once through the cooling systems are vacuuming up trillions of newly hatched fish, and then it cooks them in the heat exchangers. There's strong evidence that the decline in the fish stocks along the entire northeast Atlantic seaboard is due more to the destructions of the baby fish than the overfishing of the adults by the commercial fleets. And that the Indian Point plant in the Hudson River sucks in 2.5 billion gallons of water daily and kills about 2 billion juvenile mature fish a year in the screens or in the thermal plumes. And the Nuclear Regulatory Commission estimated that more than 300 billion baby fish are killed each year, not the newly hatched, but small fries, when they are sucked into the 40-foot wide intake pipes. So these are unbelievable genocide machines, or omnicide machines when it comes to the species. And the journalists get a big fistful of money from the scientists, and they're feeling good, and the scientists got tons of money to pretend that they're good people, right? Make them feel good while they destroy everybody's futures. Conference of Parties 29 began today. On the table this year, global uncertainty and a looming Trump presidency. That was a big theme in all the stories today. Uncertainty looms large ahead of the UN climate conference because of Trump's presidency. Really, they got to take a shot. It's just it's just nothing but contempt all around, isn't it? Everything's a weapon to be used to attack anybody that disagrees with them. And you can see the weapon they're using against me tonight. It's called censorship. 16 people on my show that I've been doing for over a decade. 5 days a week, not 1 day a week. And 13 likes. It's insane. 34 minutes into the show. That's called censorship. Horrific. Cowardly on top of that censorship. Uncertainty and corruption are already looming over this year's climate negotiation. You're talking about something global. Climate is global. As the delegates descend on an oil-rich Baku to start talks, the last 3 times has all been in an oil country. The host pays for it too, right? Is the third petrostate in the road to host an annual talks? That's a hoodwinking, isn't it, of the United Nations Climate Change Conference? It's not United Nations. It's co-opted nations. It's sedition. 195 countries should be charging these participants with sedition, right? And then they use the word COP, C-O-P. That's pretty arrogant, no matter how you look at it. It is, right? They want to appeal to the young population who's don't have critical thinking skills. Alden Meyer of the think tank E3G, we covered him last year. Think tank, which this is what my organization actually is. It's a think tank. Right, we're anti-nuclear on Earth and in space because it's man-made, it's anthropogenic, and so we shouldn't be introducing it into the biosphere on our only planet, and we certainly shouldn't be introducing it into something so precious as space. It's very arrogant for us to do. There are reports that the Trump's transition team is already preparing to pull the United States out of the Paris Agreement. There are reports. Again, this is a conjecture, right? As he did in the first term, but this time climate advocates fear a bigger impact. Well, they want the money. They don't care about the country. And American could fund them with a lot of money. They want a lot of money. They want $70 trillion, I believe it is. All countries at constipated parties. We will be watching very closely how the U.S. negotiators behave at the Conference of Parties 29. I mean, they had over almost 500 lobbyists, climate lobbyists there last year. Down in Saudi. 2024 virtually certain to be the warmest year on record. Yeah, the warmest years on record are, in the last human experience, are post-Chernobyl. All the supercell cyclones, typhoons, hurricanes are post-Chernobyl. Like you're seeing, the percentage, there has been, since we had nuclear testing started and the nuclear emissions from 1,000 fuel pools, because all the fuel pools are still splitting atoms. That's why nuclear is such a nightmare for a biosphere. And then you got the creature himself over there. Nations gather for UN climate talks in Baku. So again, so what they're doing is they bring them to a foreign country, and then these people are all handpicked. They're all pro-UN, so to speak. And then any decisions they make are now implemented in the 195 countries that are signed on to this corporation with the same structure as McDonald's, known as UN. Such a betrayal to have this corporation have put themselves in a position. This is a planet killer machine, is the best way to describe UN. Nations gather for UN climate talks. A year after a historical agreement to transition away from coal, oil, and gas. Geothermal, of course. Why doesn't geothermal have any kind of say in this? It does, but it's not. There's no traction, right? The planet can deal with coal emissions, gas emissions, and oil emissions because it's indigenous to the planet. It's the same material as the solar system, and everybody on the planet is already, and all the species are acclimated to it through genetic superior selection. If you didn't put your coal plants in the cities, and it'd be literally no issues with it whatsoever. No matter what emissions you're talking about, if you put it in a population area, you can claim that it has adverse effects, no matter what it is. But nuclear is surrounded by farms. All nuclear power plants, nuclear dumps are surrounded by farms because the fuel pools are always hemorrhaging radiation. So your biggest threat to your health is your supermarket, because all nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms for hundreds of square miles. That is a threat to everybody on the planet. But the emissions from the fuel pools are a threat to every species. It's the biggest threat we got to humanity is the 80 years of emission from the nuclear industry. You know, if you look at Hanford got 172 tanks in the ground, right? These are 300,000 gallon tanks or something. But in the 50s and 60s, they dumped, I can't even remember the number anymore. I shouldn't quote the number. The number was equal anyway to 1.4 million of those large tanks, those 300,000 gallon tanks. Was those the 450 billion gallons, which is equal to an aquarium, a nuclear waste 6 feet wide, 518 feet tall, wrapped around the entire planet. That's just one site. That's just one facet of the emissions. The whole story is insane, boy. And it's right alongside the Columbia River, which ends up ultimately migrating down to the 25,000 farms down in the Columbia River and then into the Pacific. It's scheduled to run until November 22nd. We'll be here for that ride. Many other world leaders are planning to forego this year's summit. How interesting is that? What's going on about this, I wonder? Delegations are calling this the finance conference of parties, constipated parties. As leaders are aiming to create a new target for funding climate action in developing countries. As leaders are aiming to create, without the consensus of the countries they're talking about, a new target for funding climate action. So they're just looking for another way to loot 195 countries so that the population doesn't reject it, right? United Nations, well, they're just going to push it through anyway, see? I guess one of their politicians will create a bill and then it'll become on part of the lexicon. United Nations Executive Secretary for Climate Change. The executives. I'm the executive scientist for the nuclear proctologist.org, by the way. For climate change, said that without better financing, it will be near impossible to achieve the world's climate goals. Without better financing. So, Climate 21 is how do we loot 195 countries and anybody else that wants to participate? Ahead of the conference, an army of social media bots was promoting. I went up to the story. The army of bots promotes the petrostates, because it's 3 in a row now, right? Hosting the global climate talks. At least 1,800 fake accounts on X, which, what a stupid name for Twitter's. Like, really, what a stupid name for Twitter. Are praising Baku, a major oil gas producer, according to the analysts shared with the Washington Post. So they got 1,800 bots, Autobots out there spamming everything. That's what we need with nuclear, right? We need 1,800 bots on X promoting the nuclearproctologist.org. 2,800 X accounts that collectively sent between around 10,800 tweets, retweets, and replies about the conference between October 17 and October 24. That's only 4 tweets each. Less than 4 tweets each, right? So these are not bots, most likely. These are human accounts. These are just ghost accounts. It found that nearly 3/4 of the accounts were created this year, and roughly 2/3 had activity patterns consistent with bots, where they post 4 tweets in a year. Is that what they're saying? Jones did not determine who created the bots, which are defined as automated accounts that are programmed to do specific tasks, often more quickly than a human can manage. Which is true, because there's no way I can do 4 tweets in one day. I'm only human, right? Thank God for bots. Meet the man most responsible for saving Conference of Parties 29. And then he got him surrounded by cats with hearts on them, licking their paws. He's such a nice man, Dana. Whoever invented the notion of herding cats never imagined the frustration of guiding 190 nations along a complex path to net zero, guiding them, strong-arming them, straw-manning them. That the mandate of the Simon Stirrell the former environmental minister of Grenada. Why would you want an environmental minister in a country that's unbelievably polluted? Who's now, no offense to the people there, but hey, that's the reality, right? Who's now the United Nations climate chief. He must have been pretty darn crooked to get that job. The man, he's like Geraldine Thomas in that video clip I showed you earlier. The man most responsible for achieving the Paris Agreement. Actually, he's nowhere near that. She's pretty evil, man. The man most responsible for achieving the Paris Agreement goal of limiting climate change to 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2030. Unless you can put 80 years of emissions from the nuclear industry back in the genie bottle. Carbon doesn't cause the planet to heat up. It's radioactive fallout. Telling you is that carbon is the problem. They do it everywhere. You see it everywhere, right? But carbon doesn't pulse energy almost at the speed of light every second. And the nuclear industry produces more anthropogenic man-made atoms than carbons out there, right? Wrap your mind around that statement. There's over 1,000 fuel pools worldwide with reactor cores in them that are still splitting atoms with no containment. That stuff never goes away. And these are perpetual machines, by the way. They never stop producing invisible plumes covering the entire planet. And it gets assimilated in everything. And ultimately, it sterilizes all the smaller creatures first. And then everybody else follows eventually. Climate action will continue despite Trump's return. U.S. envoy tells the conference of parties. So here you got United States envoy saying, despite their new president, we're going to keep doing whatever we want. John Podesta, is that how you pronounce that? John Nagoon. He added that the outgoing president, Alzheimer's Joe, landmark climate legislation, the Inflation Reduction Act, which is basically for the small modular reactor industries, right? Yeah, they threw some money symbolic at solar and wind, but they were going to get the money anyway. The money was about allocating the majority of it to the fabled small modular reactors and create all this hype that could then be used by the stock markets to liquidate the assets of the unsuspecting investors every 2 weeks or so. Oh, no, there's a nuclear renaissance. You better buy. We've been covering it for over a decade straight, which provides billions of dollars in subsidies for clean energy. Like calling, and it's interesting because they don't use the word nuclear in any of these stories. There's quite a few stories with these exact paragraphs, which provides billions of dollars in subsidies for clean energy. And so somewhere along the way, they called nuclear clean energy, which is the most resource-intensive energy on the entire planet, period. Like just getting their hands on the fuel is absurd. So when they tell you that this little pellet is equal to this many barrels of oil, if you can see on the other side of the wall behind them, there's just a mount of stuff left over and chemicals that were evaporated into the environments for the original separation of the uranium-308, right? Not to mention when it goes through all the processing to get into a fuel rod. It's absurd, right? The perpetual lies. They've told the lies for 80 years, never been challenged on it. And so they just regurgitate it to the point where the average person just assumes it must be true because it sounds complicated. It's nuclear. I don't know what I'm talking about nuclear. Unless Homer Simpson told him, right? They're very. It's generation after generation of the inbreeds who've done it to us too. So they're a really nasty lot now. Say they're very entitled bunch is the best way to put it, I guess. We continue to drive investments in solar, wind, and other technologies. Nuclear. Well, we've covered a lot. We covered it during that whole sickening 2022 nightmare, right, where they pushed it right through. Trump will probably claw that back. U.S. Climate Envoy says work will continue despite Trump's return. Conference parties 29. So there was a lot. This was the U.S. Climate. This was the U.S. Climate Envoy spitting on the newly elected president. For those of us dedicated to climate action, I'm dedicated to climate action. You got to get rid of the real emitter, which is anthropogenic man-made radioactive fallout. Last week's outcome in the United States is obviously bitterly disappointing, Pondessa said at the summit. Another dig at the big platform. But what I want to tell you today is that while the United States federal government, it's pretty sad they only had Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. They had about 340 million people. That's how screwed up the control politics are there. Nobody can get in their foot in the door. May put climate action on the back burner. Work to contain the climate change is going to continue in the United States. So this is them saying they're going to keep, no matter what Trump says, they're going to keep doing their work to contain the change. In other words, promote nuclear. That's fusion and small modular reactors, right? That's the promotion right now. And Trump has promised to rescind the IRA. To do so would require an act of Congress, which is the Inflation Reduction Act. Has promised to rescind the Inflation Reduction Act. That's awesome. That'll gut the small modular reactor and the fusion scam they got running out there right now. To do so would require an act of Congress, and that could be elusive due to the support for some Republican lawmakers whose districts benefited from the Inflation Reduction Act linked investments. So they like entrenched it into the local political system and governments and communities. And so if Trump pulls it, then they're going to lose their investment. And so they should sue the former administration who done it, right? To get back some of their losses. Deals of up to $1 trillion in annual climate finance for developing countries, replacing the target of $100 billion. So they multiplied it by 10. And so the idea, I think, is like they're going to ask for $1 trillion and then be happy with $100 billion, basically, right? One would assume that's what they're up to. Just come looking for an absorbent amount of money so they can get an absorbent amount and do whatever they want with it. You know, when you put all this money in a big kit, the interest from it every day is significant, right? They're looting that too. As the Conference of Parties / Constipated Parties 29 starts, what's Canada's role in the climate finance negotiations? So here's the media, the pro-UN media coming out and telling you how to think. Failure to achieve a new goal at the United Nations annual climate talks may undercut confidence in a major international agreement and strike a blow against its efforts to limit the global warming, which is caused by 80 years of emission from the nuclear industry. All the fuel pools, there's over 1,000 of them worldwide, not counting all the dumps they done in the oceans. The British done it for 3 decades, just went out and dumped it in the ocean, the worst of the worst stuff. On the continental shelf, the nursery of the Atlantic. So they're either idiots or they tried to kill the life of the planet by doing that, right? No matter where you dump it, if you're dumping it in water, you're going to destroy the lifeblood of the planet. Without water, we ain't got no planet. Without carbon, we got no planet. And this is what nuclear is really good at destroying. It's set up perfectly to destroy them, eh? And then again, they're quoting another Berlin-based climate think tank. The other one was from United Kingdom, rather. So a think tank gets the prominence, not common sense. That's their think tank's jobs, right, are to herd you in the direction the UN wants you to run to and get you into a bottleneck and then stick needles in you and everything else. Climate talks open with calls for a path away from the road to ruin, but the real focus is money. How much you want? We want it all. Same as last year, and the year before, and the year before that. The effects of climate change in disasters like hurricanes, droughts, and floods. So the droughts are caused because you kill the biota in the ground. And the ground doesn't function anymore. You kill the fungus, you kill the bacteria, you kill all the biota. And now the water doesn't get sucked up by the biota anymore, right? And doesn't get recycled by recycling the litter and the foliage. So now you have flash floods. If you got a drought, you're going to have floods, right? Because the drought, the ground is so dry for so long, water can't be absorbed into it, so it's going to run off, which is not the normal cycle, right? It's a different cycle. And so what that means is, rivers are going to overflow and everything else, right? And everybody's in the way of the floods because if you're at the bottom of the hill, that's where the water shows up, so to speak. But we talked about the hurricanes, typhoons, cyclones earlier. How they're a direct relationship to the acceleration of these supercell hurricanes, typhoons, and cyclones can be traced back to post-Fukushima. Yeah, they happened before that. But most of it's post-nuclear industry, right? So the nuclear testing, like all the underground testing, by the way, everything's vented into the biosphere at enormous speeds on top of that. And then the holes in the grounds, once you crack the earth open, then all that rain goes down there and ends up washing those emissions into the water tables eventually, right? There's nuclear test sites where they've done nuclear bombs underwater that are still, those craters underground are still at 400 and 500 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. And so which means there's a chain reaction going on down there. And so any water that ingresses into these cracks in the earth because created by the explosion are going to be washing new radioactive material perpetually into the ecosystem. And, after when they were doing nuclear testing, one of the things they noticed was that the structure of water for 1,800 miles circumference changed. I don't know where that study is anymore. I must look it up, I guess. Maybe I can get lucky and find it again. I got a pretty good memory but it's limited because we cover so much every day, right? Conference of Parties 29 is the unmissable moment to chart a new path forward for everybody. It's very worried about those types of statements. We don't want you to chart a path forward. We want our own country to do their own science and come up with their own assertions, not taking some unelected, unappointed, unknown entity from a military-industrial complex's word, right? That's why UN and their military-industrial complex. 190 militaries. They got their own army. They got their own navy. They got their own aircraft. They got their own nuclear weapons. They got their own aircraft carriers. If that's not a military-industrial complex, what the hell is? And their little pit bull is called NATO, right? Which is 30 militaries. Dozens of climate activists at the conference, many of them wearing Palestinian. I mean, there's 90 other conflicts going on on the planet currently, right? And I mean, yes, what they've done to the Palestinians, what they've done, there's over 1 million Lebanese are homeless. Israel has been getting just destroyed everywhere they go on top of it. Goldman Sachs projects $75 trillion price tag as Conference of Parties 29 opens. That's a frightening statement, isn't it? How much you want? Well, at least $75 trillion would be probably more, but let's say $75 trillion and we'll work on it. We'll figure it out later. Like, do you know how much geothermal you can produce for $75 trillion? Let's have a look at it and let's figure it out. Let's do something. I don't know if my calculator will do that one. Let's try it. Oh. Hang on, wait for it. Uh, 75 billion, 75 trillion. Did I get that right? That's millions. Yeah. I'm stupid tonight. Hundreds, thousands, millions, billions. We need 3 more. Dana. Pretty slow tonight. I noticed. I wasn't even going to do a show tonight. That's how slow I actually am. It won't do any bigger than that. So $7.5 trillion. So we'll multiply the number by 10 when we get it, okay? So a megawatt of geothermal is about $5 million. That's not 5 million, Dana. I know. So you're talking about, now we've got to multiply that by 10. And then divide it by 1,000 to get gigawatts. So currently there's a 4,800 gigawatts gas, oil, and coal worldwide. So you're talking about 15 million gigawatts. So let's divide that by 4,800 gigawatts, which is the current capacity worldwide of gas, oil, and coal, and that's equal to 3,000 times the gas, oil, and coal we got on our planet worldwide in geothermal that we can create with $75 trillion. So which seems like a better deal to you or me, blowing all of that on whatever fancies the UN's fancies has today. Let's come back over here. Carbonomics. I just hate these people sometimes, eh? Carbonomics. $75 trillion. It's just a ridiculous amount, isn't it? Yeah, but they want to live like royalty for 1 billion years, Dana. Net carbon credits. So net zero. La. Which was a paper written by Miles Allen. And so this mouse is screwing up now. Not mouse, but keyboards. I thought we resolved it last night. Have you got this hacked or whatever? Net zero. We're not going to find that tonight. That reminds me, I got to load that stuff up, right? Let's keep going. Net zero carbon was a paper written by Miles Allen. Carbon footprint was a public relation advertisement campaign by BP Oil after one of their ships contaminated the coastline. They shifted the blame to you because you used the oil. And that's where the carbon footprint came from. The climate change came from James Hansen, who says that radioactive fallout is like flying on a plane, which simply is not true. A plane lands, you're good. If the radiation's in your body is pulsing energy at the speed of light every second, almost the speed of light every second, wrecking your chromosomes, your DNA, and your cells for the rest of your life, right? And it bioaccumulates into you. Every time you fly a plane, that doesn't bioaccumulate to you. They're completely different, right? A massive investment requirement averaging $1.5 to $2 trillion of infrastructure spending per year all the way up to 2070. Nuclear power also gained momentum, with Goldman Sachs research projecting a doubling of global installed nuclear capacity by 2050, which means you got to build. I should break out the calculator again. It's simply not going to happen, right? Nuclear's still going backwards. Nuclear's still losing. Oh. Nuclear's still losing. So doubling nuclear power by 2050. Okay. I can almost do that in my head. Like 5 a year or something, is it? Let me bring up that. So if you're going to double nuclear in 26 years, there's 413 reactors out there divided by 26 years. It'll build 16 a year. But what they just, they produce more gigawatts just this year in solar power alone. So if you look at all the storage applications that are available, like sand and lava rocks and compressed air storage and water batteries. So water batteries, you got two aquifers you build, two holding, and excess energy, you pump water to the top one. So when the wind's not blowing, sun's not shining, but the wind's always blowing somewhere, right? So if you got a grid of them, then you always got power, right? Nuclear power also gained momentum. Goldman Sachs. Net zero by 2070. So last year, the net zero routine was brutal, wasn't it? UN Atomic Chief backs nuclear power at conference parties 28. So last year, Rafael Grossi, the Director General of the International, I'm the Director General of the nuclearproctologist.org, by the way. He said no one died. Remember that last year? That was hilarious. Or that was 2006, or conference parties 26. Remember that statement? No one died at Fukushima. Everybody blew up laughing when he said it. No one died at Fukushima, Dana. We hear that all the time, by the way, don't we? The trolls are out there all the time. I mean, in the first year, there was 865,000 extra cancers. Not everybody got health care. Not everybody's diagnosed. It's not just cancer. There's heart, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes. And there was a study just recently came out on diabetes, and I meant to have it for tonight. How cesium-137 has been linked to the diabetes epidemic worldwide. There's a study showing how that played out. It was sent to me a little while ago, 2 weeks ago or something. And I was looking at it today and I forgot to screen capture everything. Okay, let me get back on track here for 1 second. Problem with this story is you can't rush anything because it's an educational program. So if I don't show you the information, I'm not a very good guy. Let me see what we got here. Heart attacks, radiation illnesses. Oh yes, this one here is pretty good. Extreme increase of mortality caused by cardiac diseases, heart attacks. Death rates might give the creeps to some people. So in Japan, in 2012, there was 865,000 extra cancers. But in a single month, compared to any other year before, there was an abnormality, a spike of 12.5% of fatalities from excess heart attacks. There's a lot of those little types of tidbits, right? And just bear with me. Just once you start that process, you're not supposed to. You're not supposed to slow down. You kind of forget sometimes how much is going on, right? There we go. We're almost there. I'm on the page. Just got to grab a few. Let me do it this way. So what happens now is if I type in a word, I get halfway through the word and then most of the word disappears and only the first letter shows up. So they got a hack done to me, haven't they? That's interesting. So there's 35.8% of the Fukushima children. There used to be 1 in a million. Now it's 35.8%. So 13,646 out of 38,000 with thyroid tumors. And so an adult's thyroid is 3 by 5 centimeters, but a child is only 1 by 2 centimeters or 2 by 2 centimeters. So the tumors, they're now with tumors of 2 centimeters. Tumors of 2 centimeters. So the child's thyroid is only around 2 centimeters. And what that means is when you scale it up, that's 358,000 out of a million, when it used to be 1 in a million. So you got 865,000 extra cancers. Not everybody got health care. Not everybody's diagnosed. It's not just cancer. You got people, massive heart attacks. You got thyroid tumors. You also got 14.2% of every 100,000 live births that need open heart surgery, congenital malformations. Then you got just a couple more, just to help articulate why nuclear is such a nightmare. And because it's going to get covered in this story we're about to do. There was 5,000 plant workers with internal radiation exposure. But Dana, I thought they had paper suits on, right? I know what you're saying. Yes, they did. And paper suit can't protect you. And so why were they doing it? Because it ain't academics, right? It's the most vulnerable of society. Children's health problems increasing, incurable stomach aches, chest pains, nosebleeds, don't stop, diarrhea. Inhaling just one hot particle can cause a cancer. Well, it also compromises your immune system, right? And you're more susceptible to pathogens and viruses that were normally harmless and innocuous and benign. So 3,000 evacuees were rushed to the hospital by ambulance. That was May 17, 2011. From shelters in Fukushima, Iwate, and Miyagi, which we know now, and we have the luxury of hindsight, and the documentation to back up those assertions, was incredibly radioactive. It's unparalleled in history, by the way. And quite a lot of these people died. That was radiation poisoning. And realized that these places are the same place where they picked up 30 million one-ton bags of radiation in just 3% of the land. And they tried to blame the evacuation, the deaths, on stress. But it's not stress, right? Because we've seen millions, post-Fukushima, we've seen millions of people evacuate in many different countries. We've never seen any casualties like this. I don't know why you're laughing. It's a fact, he said, that nobody died at Fukushima. There were no deaths attributable to the exposures to radiation. Now, he's saying this in 2020 or 2021. Have I got the date there? Yeah, 2 years ago. Well, it's Conference Party 26 when he made that statement, Rafael Grossi, right? Was it that same year? No, that was last year. So when Rafael Grossi tells you there was no deaths, people died because of the evacuation. He's saying these people died because of evacuation, but we've never seen people die of evacuation. And all these supercell typhoons and cyclones and hurricanes post-Fukushima, where they evacuated 6, 7, 8, 10, 20 million people at a time in certain countries. We still never seen these numbers, which the numbers of evacuees is much smaller than those numbers, right? But they said it was very traumatic because of the evacuation. People are traumatized every day. They don't die from evacuation, or they don't die because of trauma. They're traumatized per se in large numbers, right? If they had other underlying health problems, maybe, but we're taking this very seriously. This is not a laughable matter. But everybody was laughing at Ralphio Grossi because he was trying. Scientists found no evidence this caused radiation-induced. Yeah, well, the scientist he's talking about, by the way, is the UN scientist. So suggesting these children won't have adverse effects, fine. But you can't deny that there's 865,000 extra cancers. Not everybody was diagnosed. Not everybody has health care in the first year. This is a spike in the year after Fukushima. Same thing with extreme mortality events there. Right? You can't just... So pretty dishonest. This was the year that he first introduced nuclear at the UN's Conference of Parties. All of a sudden, and I mean, like it's not a friendly atmosphere. You need $500,000 just to get a booth there, right? I can't have a booth there because I don't have $500,000. But you know what? If I had $500,000, they're so greedy they would give me the booth. It'd be game over. Suggesting nuclear power doesn't produce greenhouse gas emissions is very, very important for these people to frame the narrative that way, isn't it? We see that all the time. In fact, that's one of their leading statements, because all radiation emissions, all the fuel pools are doing this, each one of them. But this is the actual Fukushima plume you're looking at. And this is cesium based on France's study of 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air. It's pulsing energy almost at the speed of light. That's warming, that's emissions that will warm the planet. You got an invisible... Now, gas, oil, and coal emissions don't make plumes that covers the planet too, by the way. Nuclear is sharply opposed by many environmentalists because of its waste, which is splitting atoms into the biosphere with no containment. Once you take it out of the reactor, put it in a fuel pool, each fuel pool is boiling off about 120,000 liters a day. There's 1,000 fuel pools worldwide doing that. Not counting universities, experimental, national laboratories. And so these emissions are producing plumes that covers the entire planet. Every day, those plumes are continuous plumes. It never stops coming out of 1,000 fuel pools every day, because the fuel that used to split atoms to power 1 million homes and businesses is now in no containment in a pool. We're still splitting those same atoms. That's why it boils off 120,000 liters. And that's why almost every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms. And that is why, that kind of information is why I only have 16 people on my show. 17 thumbs up. Despite an hour and 20 minutes into the show. And these are very difficult shows. I don't know if people really appreciate how difficult it is to be able to articulate all of this. Like, I put a lot of work into everything I do, because it's an educational program. When I provide you with this documentation, that is unassailable documentation. This is the Norwegian Institute for Air Research. That's French's government. There's Norwegian government, same thing, right? French government. But we also have the numbers, the actual studies showing, quantifying the radioactive fallout, right? That quantifies those particular numbers. Like these plumes were 500,000 times their normal post-nuclear industry, nuclear weapons. Again, right, these are not honest numbers, because the fuel pools are all hemorrhaging radiation into the environment, right? And I mean, these numbers have never been seen before. And plumes cover the whole planet in just 20 to 30 days in all the models. Pretending that doesn't happen doesn't make it go away, doesn't change the fact that we had this event. And so if you find one plume, you're going to find many other plumes. Let me see what else I got there for you. Yeah, let's cover those. I mean, the numbers, so if you got iodine, if you got cesium, if you got any isotope whatsoever, you can extrapolate all the other isotopes. 40 million atoms, so a becquerel is the result of an atom. You can't have a becquerel without an atom. That's what creates the becquerel. The becquerel is the pulse, the explosion every second, almost at the speed of light from the atom. That's the best way to think about it in layman's terms. Because you can breathe in the atom, but you can't breathe in the becquerel. So if you got the atom in your body, now it's producing the becquerels inside your body. You reckon your chromosomes, your DNA, your cells, permanent lesions to your organs. 40 million atoms of iodine-131, a single bed of kelp off California. Amount much likely larger. 1,500 atoms of the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs from spraying the salt water on the melted reactors in California. Fukushima released so great, the radioactive aerosols in Washington were 100,000 times normal. Very high concentrations of hot particles in the Pacific Northwest. And here's another, they got quite a lot of this stuff. These are actual documentations of the physical atoms. So the xenon-133 at 450,000 times above detection levels, persisting for weeks, is that particular model right there. Look, that's the xenon, but this model is based on just a fraction of the inventory that was actually lost. Does this information even matter anymore? Does anybody even care? The world is so complacent. The only thing that matters now is if United Nations says you can wipe your arse 3 times in a day or 2 times in a day, right? Because that's common. Nuclear is sharply opposed by many environmentalists because of its waste, but they will never tell you why the waste, because it's splitting atoms. And those atoms produce plumes that covers the entire planet from 1,000 fuel pools worldwide every day. Geothermal energy, the forgotten renewable. A little tickle in my throat again tonight. It's the best resource in the world, and we have the technology now to drill deep enough to tap into enormous temperatures, 6, 7, 8, 900 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. And the quasi-electric is one of them. And 2 kilometers below the surface lies a mineral-rich cauldron of hot water where temperatures can exceed 390 degrees. It's interesting because they framed that way. They want to harvest the minerals in the water when it comes up and use it for steam, right? The lithium extraction, stuff like that. But the closed loop cycle that just recycles over and over and over, any community can build their own. Any community could do it. Geothermal, right? It's not. It doesn't take up a large area or anything. And so quasi-electric is going to use magic, basically, to disintegrate the rocks. This is technology pioneered at MIT University. But there's other companies out there just going to use high-pressure water, 25,000 pounds per square inch, jets to cut the rocks at deep. Because the problem with drilling deep is it's very difficult on the bits. And there's a $50 billion estimate for bits over the next 15, 20 years. And so there's good money investment, so to speak, by extrapolating from that. But to get away from that, what one company is going to do is 25,000 pounds per square inch water jets to split the rocks that are really hot and difficult to drill through, and then use pneumatic hammers to crush those particular rocks, and then the drill bit will come down behind all of that. And so they can probably drill their depth 6 times quicker than most companies can. And then the quasi-electric will just evaporate the rocks all the way down to the depth that they want, and they can reach any depth with that technology, right? And they're just going to vacuum up the the smoke from the evaporation of the rocks. That's a pretty neat one. And there's quite a few more like that out there. That if a big country was to say, okay, well, let's mass produce this technology, and got a bunch of their universities to come on board to make it a bit easier to mass produce it, they'd be up and running next year. They would flatline gas, oil, coal, nuclear plants worldwide in about 3 years. Which is geothermal, right? But we still need mobile energy, like hydrogen. And you don't want so-called pink hydrogen from nuclear power plants. The most resource-intensive way to make hydrogen is with a nuclear power plant, right? And the emissions are hideous for 8 million species. Over the last decade, California poured billions of dollars into renewable energy goals, scale up wind, solar, beyond expectations, while virtually ignoring geothermal. Despite possessing the most productive geothermal fields in the United States itself. And while geothermal sources provide virtually the same amount as 2 decades ago, MIT estimated just much extractable energy laid below the U.S. in 2006. Their best guess is 200,000 exajoules was so large that even releasing 2% could supply 2,000 times the primary energy needs for the entire country. Without any technological improvements in drilling technologies, all you got to do is go ahead and do it. So 2% would be 2,000 times the energy they currently use in the United States is available, and geothermal. And because of Nikola Tesla, you can also you can move energy long distances. Like if you got 1,000 miles of wind mills on the mountains, the wind's always blowing heavily somewhere, right? And on mountains, it's always blowing heavy. The wind is never calm on a mountain, right? But even if you just put it in spots where it's not interfering with communities, they like putting it in the communities because then the communities will start complaining. They'll use that as justification to get nuclear power, right? In spite of its enormous potential, geothermal option for the United States has been largely ignored. In 1980, the Department of Energy requested $111 million for geothermal, received only $15 million. Between 2019, the U.S. spent only $1 billion on geothermal technology, a tenth of what they spent on fossil, a third of solar. It's been largely ignored. Yeah, because once people realize what geothermal is, and any community can set it up themselves, and you can stop all the bickering and just get busy and secure your future. That sounds stupid, I'm sure. Today, geothermal is because the United Nations is not required if you introduce the geothermal appropriately. Is a big player in the U.S. energy industry, supplying just 0.4% of the country's electricity in 2019. Yes, here's one of the panderers. Babayev is the president of the Conservative Party. We must treat the climate crisis with the same urgency as COVID. History shows it can be done. It'll cost trillions of dollars, but we can do it. Man, they're sure pushing these pictures, aren't they? Not only such funding necessary as possible, it's been done before. Yeah, you closed the whole planet down, then you looted all the countries. Who done that, I wonder? Oh, I had the same characters we're talking about now. We must treat climate change with the same urgency, says you. Well, why don't you treat geothermal with the same urgency? Because it's all about money, right? Push for agreement on a new climate finance deal right from the start. And Israel attack seems imminent. So we're through the Conference of Parties stories tonight. And my apologies, but it's the first night, and so you got to put all this extra information in. It's not really extra, is it? Yeah, I didn't have too much energy when the show started. I had to finish off the show. We got significant rain for the next week, but we got 3 days of torrential rain coming starting tomorrow night. And so we just fixed the roof there last week. And one of the shingles had blown off, right? I'm in there playing guitar in the living room. It's raining. It was beautiful. It was the weekend, 2 weekends ago or something. And man, all of a sudden I hear this like water hitting the floors, right? I'm looking around and finally I spots it. I was like, oh shit. So I climbed up on the roof and went up in the attic and seen where the leak was coming from. Went up on the roof and found it and put a piece of plywood over it. And then a bunch of stuff to stop the water from running underneath it. Then we put a type of tar on it. Anyway, we're pretty sure we got it, but if not, I got to be on the ball tomorrow night. Israel could have, I'm pretty sure it's done, right? I seen 2 nails that were dripping water, not dripping, were running water. And the shingle, when you went up there, the shingle was gone, right? So it just tarred the shit out of everything up there. Israel could have easily bombed Pakistan's nuclear site, but stopped. That was quite a long time ago they're talking about. Didn't stop them from bombing Iraq's nuclear site, did it? Which France gave them, right? Everything was on track except the potential danger in the Israeli airstrikes to destroy the nuclear facilities. Even worse for Pakistan, it could have been a joint Indian-Israeli operation. I'm not sure what year that was. 17 years ago, 1981? That's more than 17 years ago. 17 years ago, on the 17th of June 1981, Israeli Air Forces destroyed an Iraqi nuclear reactor in a surprise airstrike. Like right now they're talking about hitting Iran's 5 reactors sites, and Iran says they're going to hit them back. You're talking real meltdowns again. The planet can't handle another nuclear meltdown. It really can't. Destroyed an Iraqi nuclear reactor in a surprise airstrike. Interestingly, Benjamin Netanyahu was the Prime Minister of Israel during that time. And Netanyahu's Benjamin Netanyahu. It's the right name, Yahoo, eh? Directions. Well, he raised his youngest kid to be able to recite the Torah and the Talmud. And he actually, when he was 15 years old, he actually won contests being able to recite any passage of the Torah and the Talmud at the drop of a hat. And so Benjamin Netanyahu can ask for religious justification from his youngest child on committing genocides and omnicides. Could Israel destroy Iran's nuclear program in an all-out attack? Well, they can't do jack shit without the American, the British, the French. Right? They don't build their own airplanes. They ain't going to attack anybody that can fight them. It doesn't look like they can, though, because Russia has apparently, they have their own defenses, but Russia has given them technology to shoot down, paint their jets with. That's why they abandoned their last run. U.S. and Israeli officials asserted it was more destructive than acknowledged, potentially weakening. If it was, they would have all kinds of satellite pictures. They would have took pictures of their own, right? They would have had drones flying over, taking pictures. They would have been all over the media right away. They would have been out there pounding their chests. Iran, though, can take out everything they got. Their water, their electricity, their filtration facilities, everything. They can send them back to the Stone Age for a decade in just one sweep. These planes won't even have an airport to land at when they go back. And Iran has never attacked anybody up until Israel won't leave them alone, won't stop slaughtering everybody in Gaza. Analysts suggest Israel's restraint may stem from a desire to prevent escalation. No. They went down there. There was no restraint. They went there. But Iran's continued. Like, Iran has said, if you attack us, we're going to attack you back. That's all he said. If you stop attacking them, they'll stop attacking you back, most likely. And they got to attack you back because you just attacked them. You've been attacking them for years, killing their nuclear scientists, assassinating them, right? You put Stuttgart in all their nuclear reactors, try to cause nuclear meltdowns, for goodness sakes. One of the most egregious crimes you can commit in a biosphere is a nuclear meltdown. No, and they're going to get pounded back now. Not just by Hezbollah or Hamas, but Iran. So it's going to be brutal. And America now has got 6 bombers, is it? Or 5 out of Stratofortress's bombers, staged not too far from Iran's border. So Iran would have no problem at all striking those big clumsy things on the ground. And there's nothing they can do about it. They got supersonic missiles, so they won't be able to stop it. That's what they're going to do. Citing the Begin Doctrine, which advocates preemptive strikes and nuclear threats, Israel got a doctrine for everything, don't they? They're like UN. They got a subsidy for everything to frig over your life. Israel's past actions against nuclear sites like Iraq's reactor in 1981. Following the barrage, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin asserted that Iran should not make the mistake of responding to Israelis. See, and that's an interesting framing of the narrative, isn't it? Responding, because that's exactly what they're going to do, and that's what they told them they're going to do. And if they don't do it, then what's to stop Israel from doing it again? If Tehran continues to escalate, Iran's never created millions of refugees. Israel's down there doing that. Now they're over in Lebanon punishing, which is collective punishment, which is illegal, in order to try to get the population to turn against Hezbollah, which is not going to happen. They're assimilated in now. And it's hostile behavior towards the Zionist state, vis-a-vis regional proxy groups. However, the next Israeli strike could take a different approach. So could Iran's. Well, Iran said, hey, if you don't want any power in Israel for the next couple of years, if you don't want any water filtration for the next couple of years, if you don't want any seaports or airports or military bases for the next couple of years, leave us alone. Because we'll take them all out in one day. And be damned. And they fight back. They can fight back. So Israel's going to leave them alone because that's what cowards do, right? They leave them alone. In fact, the Jewish state began doctrine ensures that a preventive strike carried to prevent enemies from possessing weapons of mass destruction / nuclear weapons pretty much implies this possibility will become a reality down the line that they are going to strike Iran. Well, Israel didn't build these jets. There's probably nobody in Israel can paint them, for goodness sakes. Back in 1981, Israeli fighter jets launched a strike targeting, well, it wasn't Israeli fighter jets, it was United States fighter jets that Israel got for free. And they record those jets they acquired from France. If the Israeli Air Force were to launch a full-blown strike targeting 6 nuclear sites and other known nuclear sites, Tehran's nuclear-related progress would be undoubtedly curtailed. No, apparently not. They got thousands of miles of tunnels and cities underground, very, very deep underground. They're not going to be hurt by a nuclear strike. You'd have to nuke the entire surface of the country to get at it. You know they got nuclear weapons. Right, they're one of the top 10 most developed nuclear countries in the world. They 100% got nuclear weapons already. But how despicable that they would even suggest targeting all the nuclear sites of all things. Remember the controversies about attacking Zaporizhzhia in Ukraine, right? Remember how the external power was cut off multiple times and there was great fear they were going to melt down in 24 hours or less? Because generally they only keep like 9-10 hours of fuel on site for the generators. And the generators generally take a whole day to get fired up and up the power, right? These are huge building-sized generators. And because they don't run them frequently, then you got to have the right people there to make it come together, right? And you can a former Anna Sobel Levy fellow at the IDC in Israel. And she has bylines in many publications, Dana. Oh my God, wow, royalty, is it? A typical newspaper byline might read, Tom Joyce, New Boston Post reporter. I got bylines everywhere, literally in thousands of places. She has bylines in many publications, including the National Interest, Jerusalem Post, the Times of Israel. So they're really trying to give her prominence, right, by doing that. You can follow her on Twitter, everybody. So I went over to her Twitter account. She got 117 she's following, and 569 that follows her. And she's better than you folks. We're just dirt compared to her. She's a darnalist. A darnalist. Israel wants to attack the U.S. ship, killing many Americans. That came out on the 9th of November. That was the USS Liberty, was it? I can't remember. I used to know that story really well. Because Americans are supporting Israel left, right, and center, everywhere, everything. But Israel attacked an American ship. Yeah, the USS Liberty. And there was an aircraft carrier. There's documentaries out there about the Americans that survived. Killed 34 Americans. They attacked it with torpedoes, with jets, with helicopters. They had their flags up, right? But they were an intelligent ship. The USS Liberty had no armament on it per se, right? It had no way of defending itself. And they had sophisticated listening devices, though. That's what they had. At the same time, a few hours before they attacked the USS Liberty, US Liberty was going past the Sinai Peninsula, where at that time there was 1,500 Egyptians were at gunpoint forced to dig their own graves in the form of trenches, and then by the Israelis, who then machine gunned them in the trenches. And then had other Jews, Zionists, bury him, and then he shot them too. So there's a graveyard there with 1,500 Egyptians on the Sinai Peninsula. And so as this was happening, the USS, I can't remember the aircraft carrier, nuclear power aircraft carrier, launched 2 fighter jets with nuclear weapons on it, headed for the Sinai Peninsula, that were going to nuke the retaliating military that was coming at the Sinai Peninsula, turned into a big sheet of glass, and also get rid of the evidence against the 1,500 Egyptians that they murdered. They made them dig their own graves in trenches and actually mowed them down with machine guns. And the U.S. Liberty, had captured all of that. Now, this is according to the survivors of the USS Liberty. But that ship had incredible damage done to it. So 170 people injured or something. Yeah, north of the Sinai Peninsula by about 47 kilometers. So they were listening in to the genocide that Israel's committing, right? I know that because I got that from... who did I get that from, I wonder? He's really good. I can't remember his name for some reason. I got a few problems with that tonight. Israel apologized for the attack, saying the USS Liberty had been attacked by an error, as it was mistaken for an Egyptian ship, but it had no armament, so it wasn't a threat. It wasn't shooting. It was a listening machine, right? It was a high-tech. It was a tech boat. They know who it was. They flew close to it before they finally attacked it. And many senior officials and the survivors of the attack rejected those assertions and maintained the attack was deliberate. And they eventually had some guy climb up on the roof and hooked up an antenna. They reached the aircraft carrier, and the aircraft carrier sent in fighter jets to defend it, and then Israeli pulled out. Fact-finding reports indicate the U.S. ship was on a patrolling mission, and the Israeli Air Force and the Israeli Navy motor torpedo boats were fully aware of it was an American ship. Israel apologized, pays the monetary compensation to the families killed and those who were wounded long after, right? A very long time after. And who gave them the money to pay him anyway? It was the Americans. Iran news. MP calls for immediate nuclear test as Tehran signals escalation amid the U.S. pressure. So if they set off a nuclear test, that's going to be meant as a deterrent, not to come and attack us, right? And this is the National Council of Resistance of Iran. That's who told that story. The National Council of Resistance of Iran. That Iran, one of the MPs in Iran was calling for nuclear testing. So this was meant to signal, that's what they're hoping for, that was that Americans now would use it as justification to take Iran out before it can develop a nuclear weapon. Right? You know I'm right. Yipper, man. Let me get rid of all this nightmare I already got put here, so I don't run into a wall tomorrow when I start again. Bleak and there. All right, now we're starting to getting somewhere. Just bear with me. Oh, so I did clean off that stuff left over. Perfect. Okay, that's great. Let's go ahead and close the poll down, I guess. Geez, we got pounded tonight, did we? 15 viewers, 21 likes, 25 votes. That was a pretty bad beating. That's the way it goes for me, unfortunately. Everybody likes to shit on me. On top of that. What you'll find out if you hang around at all with me is I'm honest. I'm boringly honest. I'm to the point of I'm boring. Is Conference of Parties 29 push for a small modular reactor? That's meant as a joke, by the way. Not this, though. Is Conference of Parties 29 push for small modular nuclear power a disgusting betrayal of humanity and millions of species? Well, yes, it is, Dana. Thank you so much. Oh, thank you so much. But just also remember that these plumes that I'm showing you, they're real, okay? That really happened. There really is an effect. It doesn't turn to fairy dust. Maybe in a couple of million years it goes away. It's still going to be radioactive lead then, right? So thank you everybody that participated in the poll. You're awesome. Your Excellence. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. We're going to play a song. Did James Lewis, one of his early songs that he created, anti-nuclear songs? His YouTube channel is full of them. And you should download them, put them on your kids' phones, And they'll, whatever they don't like, they'll get rid of. But the other ones, they'll get to know. They'll recite the words, they'll share with their friends. And the world is just a little bit better. Because that's what we need. We need a revolution, right? Okay, so I'm going to play a song. I'm not going to jump in because that's how I roll. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Have a great night and great day tomorrow. We'll see everybody on the next show. We got Conference of Parties Day 2 tomorrow. I guess we got a lot of information coming. We're probably going to have to cover quite a bit. But we will have a news cycle too after tomorrow night. Have a great night. Take care, everybody.
In the Tokyo Bureau, swirling smoke and neon beams. Chicago division, fueled by heated dreams. Calm down, Charlie calls in, voice smooth as silk. Says, Dana, you're dreaming, don't cry over spilt milk. On Dana Durnford show, the chatter's turning wild. But Charlie shoots it down with that cool cat style. Unit 3's no killer, no harm to see life. He chuckles in the static, cuts through the strife. Oh, calm down, Charlie, with his nuclear charm. He says starfish are just fine, there's no alarm. His words dance on airwaves with a confident glow. Calm down, Charlie steals the whole radio show. With a snap and a grin, Charlie's voice so clear scatters the dread, dispels all the fear. Mux didn't hurt, he croons with a sigh. Science is for thinkers, not a whim or lie. Though Dana and the crowd may shout and roar, Charlie's unfazed, he's heard it all before. His swinging rationale, like a soothing song, says, hold on to logic, we gotta stay strong. Oh, calm down, Charlie, with his nuclear charm. He says starfish are just fine, there's no alarm. His words dance on airwaves with a confident glow. Calm down, Charlie steals the whole radio show.